The sun was just beginning to rise over the golden sands of Dubai, casting a warm glow over the grand palace that stood like a jewel in the desert. The palace belonged to Sheikh William, a billionaire known not only for his wealth but for his intelligence and his fascination with testing people's skills in unusual ways. Today, he had invited a group of people from around the world, promising them a chance to win an extraordinary reward if they could answer a question he would ask, but the question was in Arabic, a language very few of the guests spoke. Among the crowd was Emily, a quiet, thoughtful girl of 17, who had come with her mother, Sarah, the maid of the Sheikh's household. Emily's life had always been simple, full of hard work, long hours of helping her mother with household chores, and a small but safe room at the back of the palace. Despite her humble background, Emily had a curious mind and a love for learning, and over the years, she had picked up a few words of Arabic from the television shows that played in the staff quarters and from listening to the conversations of the palace staff. Emily often felt invisible among the wealthy guests, who wore fine clothes and spoke in confident voices, but her mother had always encouraged her to be brave. "Knowledge is power, Emily," Sarah often said. "Even if no one believes in you, you must believe in yourself." Emily had carried these words in her heart, and today, though nervous, she felt a quiet determination rising inside her. The other guests arrived in sleek cars, their faces showing curiosity and a little arrogance. There were businessmen in sharp suits, young women in designer dresses, and students who had traveled far, all eager for the challenge. As they gathered in the grand hall, with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors, many of them whispered among themselves, laughing lightly at the thought of a simple language test in Arabic, sure that it would be impossible for most of them and even more certain that someone else would answer if it came to the test. Emily stood at the back, holding her hands together, feeling both small and strong at the same time. The hall was silent as Sheikh William entered. His presence alone seemed to command respect. He was tall, with a carefully trimmed beard and eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore traditional white robes, yet there was an air of modern authority around him, a mix of tradition and sharp intelligence. As he walked to the center of the hall, every eye followed him. He smiled faintly and spoke in English, welcoming all the guests, but then, without pause, he switched to Arabic and posed the question. The words were elegant, flowing, precise, and immediately, the room froze. Most of the guests looked at each other with wide eyes, their confidence faltering as they realized they could not understand a single word. Some whispered guesses, trying to seem clever, but the words were meaningless, and their nervous laughter faded quickly into awkward silence. Emily, however, felt a spark of recognition. Her heart raced, but it was mixed with a strange calm. She had learned just enough Arabic to catch the meaning of the Sheikh's question, and her mind immediately began piecing together the answer. Around her, people shifted uneasily, some folding their arms, some looking down, some trying to hide their embarrassment. The air was thick with tension. Sheikh William's gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on each guest, and then it paused on Emily. There was a long, quiet moment when it seemed like the entire hall was holding its breath. Emily swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every eye upon her. She had never spoken in front of such a crowd, never in front of the Sheikh himself, yet somehow she knew she had to try. Slowly, she raised her hand. The room stirred in confusion. Most of the guests did not even know who she was, the maid's daughter standing quietly at the back, and they exchanged looks of disbelief. Some frowned, others whispered to their neighbors, "Who is she, or does she even know the language?" Sheikh William's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of curiosity crossing his face. Emily took a small step forward, her voice shaking at first but gaining strength as she remembered her lessons and her mother's words. "I know the answer," she said softly, in clear Arabic. Immediately, the hall went silent. Even the whispers stopped. The Sheik's eyebrows lifted in surprise, and a faint smile touched his lips. The other guests looked at her in astonishment. How could a simple maid's daughter know the answer to a question that had frozen so many educated and confident people? Emily's pulse raced. She could feel the weight of the room, the eyes of every guest on her, waiting to see what she would do. Some of the businessmen leaned forward, curiosity replacing their earlier arrogance. Some of the young women exchanged nervous glances. The tension in the room was almost unbearable, but Emily held her head high. She spoke the answer carefully, her words deliberate, each syllable measured and precise. Sheikh William listened intently, his expression unreadable. The room waited, not daring to breathe, as the answer left Emily's lips. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, slowly, a smile spread across the Sheik's face. He nodded slightly, clearly impressed. "Very good," he said, his voice calm but filled with a kind of admiration that the guests had not expected. "You have answered correctly, and your courage has brought you here." The other guests stared, their mouths slightly open, unable to hide their shock. Some felt embarrassed, realizing that their confidence had led them nowhere, while a young man near the front muttered under his breath, "I can't believe it, a maid's daughter." Emily's cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and nervousness. She looked down briefly, remembering her mother's encouragement, and then met the Sheik's gaze. She felt a strange warmth in that look, as if he recognized not just her answer, but the determination and heart that had brought her to this moment. Sheikh William motioned for Emily to come closer. Each step she took felt heavy and light at the same time. Heavy with the weight of everyone watching, but light with the joy of finally being seen for who she really was. She stopped a few feet away from the Sheikh, who studied her with a thoughtful expression. "Many of them thought knowledge was only for those with wealth and status," he said softly, almost to himself. "But you have shown that intelligence and courage do not depend on birth or title." Emily's eyes widened, not just at his words, but at the truth in them. She realized that this moment was more than just answering a question correctly, it was a recognition of her worth, her effort, and her courage. Around her, the guests murmured among themselves. Some whispered apologies for underestimating her. Others shook their heads in disbelief, trying to comprehend how a young girl, so quiet and simple in appearance, could have outshined them all. Emily felt a mixture of emotions: pride, surprise, and a strange happiness that she had never felt before. She thought of her mother, of all the times Sarah had encouraged her to learn and to believe in herself. Emily knew that without those lessons, she might never have dared to answer at all. Sheikh William extended his hand toward her, inviting her closer, and Emily stepped forward. She realized that this test was not just about language or intelligence, it was about heart, courage, and the willingness to try when others would stay silent. The Sheik's eyes sparkled with an unspoken promise of opportunity and respect, and Emily felt a warmth in her chest, a hope that her life could change in ways she had only dreamed of. She looked around at the other guests, who now seemed smaller in comparison, not in size, but in vision and courage. The hall was filled with a mixture of admiration, embarrassment, and silent respect, and for the first time, Emily felt that her voice, her knowledge, and her bravery truly mattered. In that golden hall, among the finest guests and wealthiest individuals, a quiet girl from humble beginnings had stepped forward and reminded everyone that true worth is not measured by appearance or status, but by the courage to act and the strength to believe in oneself. And as she stood there, Feeling both nervous and proud, Emily knew that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. The room remained silent for a long moment after Emily's answer, the kind of silence that made every heartbeat feel louder than usual, as if the grand hall itself were holding its breath. Sheikh William's eyes never left her face, and there was a quiet intensity in his gaze that made Emily feel both nervous and strangely calm at the same time. Slowly, he took a step forward, and his presence seemed to fill the room even more, commanding attention without a single harsh word. "Very well," he said, his voice deep and steady, carrying a weight that made the guests straighten in their seats. "You have not only answered correctly, but you have shown courage, honesty, and intelligence. These qualities are rare, even among the most educated or wealthy people in this world." Emily felt a rush of warmth spread through her chest, and she looked down, embarrassed by the attention but also proud that her knowledge and courage were finally being recognized. Around her, the other guests whispered to each other, their voices low and uncertain. Some shook their heads in disbelief, realizing that their own confidence had blinded them to the possibility that someone so quiet and humble could outshine them in this challenge. A young man in a tailored suit, who had been one of the first to laugh when the question was asked, clenched his fist subtly, trying to hide the shock on his face. "How?" he murmured, almost to himself, clearly struggling to understand. Meanwhile, several women exchanged worried glances, their previous smiles fading into silent acknowledgement of Emily's unexpected brilliance. Emily felt a flicker of nervousness. She had not anticipated such a strong reaction from the crowd, and her pulse raced. She tried to remind herself of her mother's advice, courage comes from knowing your own worth and standing by it. Slowly, she lifted her head and met the Sheikah's gaze once more. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, in a voice that was steady despite her pounding heart. Sheikh William's expression softened slightly, and he nodded approvingly. "It is not only the answer that matters," he said, speaking in English so everyone could understand. "It is the courage to speak, to act when fear might hold you back, and to show your true self without shame. You have done all of this, and that is why I am proud to recognize you today." Emily's lips curved into a small, shy smile, and she felt tears threaten to spill, though she quickly blinked them back. She had never felt so seen, so respected, and so proud of herself, all at once. For years, she had lived in the background, helping her mother, cleaning rooms, running errands, and always feeling that the world was full of people she could never reach. But now, in this golden hall, standing in front of one of the richest and most intelligent men she had ever met, Emily felt a sense of belonging she had never known. Sheikh William gestured for her to come closer, and she walked slowly, her steps careful but confident, each one carrying her closer to a future she could barely imagine. The other guests continued to watch, their expressions a mix of awe, envy, and respect. Some of the men whispered to each other, clearly impressed despite themselves, while a few young women nodded quietly, realizing that true skill and courage could not be judged by appearance alone. As Emily reached the center of the hall, Sheikh William placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was both encouraging and respectful. "Tell me, Emily," he asked, his voice calm but warm, "how did you learn enough Arabic to answer my question correctly?" Emily looked at him, thinking for a moment. She could have said she had studied formally, or that she had taken lessons, but that would not have been true. "I listened," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "I listened to my mother, to the staff, to the stories and shows in Arabic. I tried to remember what I heard, even when it seemed impossible. And I believed that if I tried, I could answer." Sheikh William smiled, and it was a rare, genuine smile that lit up his face. "That is remarkable," he said. "Most people would never try without formal training or the confidence that comes from wealth and status. But you, Emily, relied on your heart, your attention, and your courage. That is the mark of someone truly extraordinary." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She had never been called extraordinary before. In her small life, she had always been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed as just another servant's child. But in this moment, in this golden hall, she felt powerful and worthy in a way she had never imagined. The other guests were now leaning forward, their curiosity and surprise almost tangible. They had expected a simple test, perhaps a game to entertain the sheik, and now they were witnessing something far greater, a young girl rising above fear and status to demonstrate courage and intelligence. Some of them looked ashamed, realizing they had relied too heavily on their wealth, their education, or their appearance, and had not dared to speak when faced with uncertainty. Emily noticed the looks, but she did not feel pride in comparison to them. Instead, she felt a quiet happiness in her own achievement, in the knowledge that she had stood firm and answered honestly. Sheikh William's eyes softened as he studied her. "Emily," he said, "life often tests us in unexpected ways. It is not always the people with the best opportunities who succeed, but those who are willing to try, to act with honesty and courage, even when the outcome is uncertain. Today, you have proven that you are ready for challenges far greater than this question." Emily felt her heart lift at his words. She had always dreamed of doing something meaningful, of being noticed for her skills and her mind rather than her background. And now, it seemed, that dream was coming closer than she had ever dared to hope. The sheik clapped his hands lightly, and the sound echoed through the hall, breaking the tension and drawing everyone's attention back. "I would like to reward Emily, not just for her answer, but for her spirit, her courage, and her honesty," he said. Emily blinked, overwhelmed. She had expected perhaps a small token or a polite word of praise, but the idea of a reward from someone like Sheikh William felt almost unimaginable. The other guests now leaned forward with curiosity, some openly whispering, eager to see what the sheik would do. "Your reward," Sheikh William continued, "will be an opportunity. An opportunity to learn, to grow, and to show the world what you are truly capable of. You will have access to knowledge, mentors, and experiences that few people ever receive, and it is all because you dared to answer when others would not." Emily felt tears welling in her eyes, and she quickly brushed them away, feeling a mixture of joy and disbelief. For so long, she had believed her life would be limited by her circumstances, by the smallness of her world, and by the expectations placed upon her as the daughter of a maid. But now, for the first time, she felt that the world itself had opened its doors to her, recognizing her potential and her courage. Sheikh William smiled again, a quiet, approving smile. "Remember, Emily," he said, "the true measure of a person is not wealth, status, or appearance. It is character, courage, and the willingness to act when it matters most. You have all of these qualities in abundance, and I have no doubt that your life will be extraordinary." Emily's heart swelled with emotion. She looked around at the grand hall, at the golden chandeliers, the marble floors, and the stunned expressions of the guests. And in that moment, she realized that her life had changed forever. She had not only answered a question in a language she had taught herself, but she had also proven something far more important, that courage, honesty, and intelligence can shine through anyone, regardless of their background. The other guests began to whisper among themselves, some with admiration, some with a touch of envy, but all with recognition that something remarkable had happened. Emily felt a quiet pride and gratitude, knowing that her mother's guidance, her own persistence, and her willingness to try had brought her to this moment. Sheikh William extended his hand to her once more, and Emily took it, feeling a surge of confidence and hope. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she now had the courage to face them, and the knowledge that true opportunity comes not from luck or wealth, but from bravery, honesty, and the willingness to step forward when others hesitate. And as the golden light of the morning sun filled the hall, Emily smiled, feeling a deep sense of belonging, purpose, and the first taste of a life that could finally match her dreams, a life full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine before. After Emily's remarkable answer and the Sheik's praise, the grand hall slowly returned to normal activity, though the atmosphere had changed completely. The guests, once confident and self-assured, now looked at each other with uncertainty, realizing that appearances and wealth meant nothing without courage and knowledge. Emily stood quietly, still feeling a mixture of pride and disbelief, while Sheikh William watched her with a quiet intensity that made her feel both nervous and encouraged. He gestured toward a small seating area at the side of the hall, inviting her to sit, and Emily moved carefully, feeling the weight of everyone's attention. As she settled into the luxurious chair, she noticed some of the guests trying to strike up conversations with her, though their words were hesitant, polite, and tinged with curiosity rather than arrogance. Many of them had come to the palace believing that they were the smartest in the room, but now, faced with Emily's unexpected brilliance, they were unsure how to act. Sheikh William approached, walking with a slow, purposeful step, and when he sat across from her, the quiet confidence he radiated made Emily feel both inspired and a little intimidated. "Emily," he began, "I want you to understand that this moment is only the beginning. Talent, courage, and intelligence are important, but without guidance and opportunity, they may remain hidden. I intend to provide both for you." Emily's eyes widened as she tried to comprehend his words. The idea that someone of his wealth and influence would offer her guidance seemed almost unreal, yet the sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. "I will provide you with resources, access to education, and exposure to experiences that most people only dream about," he continued. "You will meet scholars, leaders, and innovators who can teach you more than any school or book ever could. And most importantly, you will learn to trust yourself, to make decisions, and to act with confidence in any situation." Emily felt a surge of hope and excitement that made her heart race. She had always dreamed of doing something meaningful, of being recognized for her abilities, but she had never imagined that such an opportunity would come in a place like this, surrounded by people who had assumed she was invisible. Sheikh William smiled slightly, as if reading her thoughts. "Do not fear challenges, Emily," he said. "The path ahead will not always be easy. There will be moments when others doubt you, when opportunities seem out of reach, or when you feel alone. But remember this: courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting even when fear is present, and you have already demonstrated that." Emily nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She felt a mixture of determination and nervousness. The Sheik's attention was both a privilege and a responsibility, and she understood that this moment was a turning point in her life. Around the room, the guests continued their quiet discussions, some whispering about her, some trying to compose themselves after the shock of seeing someone so humble succeed where they had failed. One woman, clearly wealthy and confident, leaned toward a man next to her and muttered, "I can't believe a maid's daughter knew the answer." We all froze. The man nodded silently, his expression unreadable, but Emily could feel the ripple of respect slowly spreading through the room. Sheikh William looked around at the guests and then returned his gaze to Emily. "You must also understand the value of humility," he said. "Talent without humility can become arrogance, and knowledge without compassion can be dangerous. I am offering you opportunity not to boast, but to grow, to learn, and to use your skills to make a positive difference in the world." Emily felt a warmth in her chest, understanding that this was more than a simple reward. It was a lesson in character, responsibility, and the importance of using her abilities wisely. She thought of her mother, who had always encouraged her to learn, to be brave, and to act with kindness. Sarah had never had much, but she had given Emily the greatest gift of all, belief in herself. Emily felt her throat tighten with emotion, and she pressed a hand lightly to her chest, remembering all the times she had doubted herself, all the moments she had felt small and overlooked. Now, in this palace filled with gold and light, she felt her worth recognized in a way that went beyond wealth or appearance. Sheikh William's expression softened further, and he leaned back slightly, as if satisfied with her understanding. "You have already shown that you can act with courage and intelligence, but life will continue to test you in ways you cannot yet imagine," he said. "It is important to stay grounded, to remember where you came from, and to never forget the values that have guided you so far. Your family, your experiences, and your integrity are all part of what makes you strong." Emily nodded again, feeling both pride and a sense of responsibility. She realized that the Sheik's attention and guidance were gifts that required dedication and care. This opportunity was not just about learning languages or answering questions, it was about growth, character, and becoming someone who could make a meaningful impact. As the hall began to settle, some of the guests approached Emily hesitantly, offering compliments or questions. A young man in a dark suit asked, "How did you know the answer so quickly?" Emily smiled softly, choosing her words carefully. "I listened, I tried to understand, and I believed that if I tried, I could answer," she said. Her words were simple, but they carried a quiet power that seemed to affect everyone around her. The guests, who had come expecting a game or a show, now realized that Emily's courage and determination were qualities they had underestimated. Sheikh William observed quietly, allowing Emily to answer, nodding occasionally in approval. He seemed pleased not only with her knowledge but with her ability to communicate calmly and confidently under pressure. As the day progressed, Emily spent time with the Sheikh, who introduced her to small lessons about strategy, critical thinking, and observation. He asked her questions, not to test her formally, but to encourage her curiosity and develop her mind. Emily felt a growing excitement as she realized that each lesson was a key to unlocking a new part of herself. Around the palace, the other guests continued their discussions, many of them reflecting quietly on their own assumptions and behaviors. Emily noticed that some people were beginning to treat her with respect they had not shown before, and while she felt grateful, she did not let it change who she was. She remained humble, remembering her mother's guidance, and quietly appreciated the fact that her actions had spoken louder than any appearance or status. Sheikh William finally stood and addressed all the guests. "Today, we have learned an important lesson," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Talent and courage can come from anywhere, and the smallest, quietest, or least expected person can sometimes achieve what the most confident cannot. We must never underestimate anyone, and we must always value effort, integrity, and the willingness to act." Emily listened, feeling a sense of pride and belonging that was both new and exhilarating. She realized that this day was not just about answering a question in Arabic, but about discovering her own strength and potential. The Sheikh turned to her once more. "Emily, this is only the beginning. You have shown the world what you are capable of, and I will continue to guide you, but your journey depends on your willingness to learn, to act, and to grow. Never forget that courage and integrity will take you further than fear or arrogance ever could." Emily's heart swelled with emotion. She felt a mixture of hope, determination, and gratitude. This moment marked the start of a life she had never imagined, a life full of learning, challenges, and the opportunity to show her true potential. She looked around at the grand hall, the guests, and the luxurious surroundings, but her mind focused on something far greater, the knowledge that she had taken the first step toward becoming someone extraordinary, and that her courage and honesty had already opened doors that she had once thought impossible. And in that golden hall, as the sun's light streamed through the tall windows, Emily felt a quiet, unshakable certainty. Her life was changing, and she was ready to embrace every challenge, every lesson, and every opportunity that lay ahead. The days that followed Emily's remarkable answer were filled with both excitement and challenge, as Sheikh William began to guide her through a world she had never imagined existed. The palace, once simply a place where she helped her mother and quietly observed, now became a classroom, a playground, and a training ground all at once. Each morning, Emily would wake early, the sunlight spilling over the golden sands, and she would meet the Sheikh in the grand hall, where he introduced her to lessons in leadership, observation, strategy, and languages, encouraging her to ask questions, to think critically, and to act with courage. Emily felt both nervous and eager each day, knowing that each lesson carried weight and meaning far beyond the palace walls. Sheikh William, ever patient yet firm, challenged her to solve problems that required thinking beyond what she had learned in school or in her quiet life with her mother. He encouraged her to consider perspectives she had never thought of, to notice small details that could make a difference, and to trust her instincts even when the answer was not obvious. Emily began to see herself in a new light. She was no longer just the maid's daughter, she was a student, a thinker, and someone who could contribute meaningfully to discussions and decisions that affected more than just herself. Her confidence grew slowly but steadily, as she realized that her courage to answer the Sheikh's question had opened doors not only to knowledge but also to the discovery of her own strength. Outside the lessons, life in the palace continued, and Emily observed the other guests, many of whom were still adjusting to the idea that brilliance could come from unexpected places. Some avoided her, unable to reconcile their own expectations with the reality of her talent, while others approached her cautiously, seeking to learn from her example or to offer friendship. Emily navigated these encounters carefully, remaining humble and kind, remembering her mother's advice that true strength was measured not only by knowledge but by compassion, respect, and integrity. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the desert, casting long shadows across the marble floors, Sheikh William presented Emily with a new challenge, a task that required not only intelligence and courage but also judgment, patience, and leadership. He asked her to organize a small team of palace staff to complete an important project, one that involved planning, coordination, and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each team member. Emily felt a mix of fear and excitement. She had never led anyone in her life, and the thought of responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. Yet, she remembered the confidence she had felt when she answered the Sheikh's question, and she knew that she could face this challenge as well. She accepted the task, and Sheikh William watched her with a quiet, approving smile. As she began to plan, Emily carefully considered each team member, learning to communicate clearly, to delegate tasks, and to inspire confidence without arrogance. The experience was difficult, and at times, she doubted herself, worried that she might fail or disappoint the Sheikh. But slowly, she discovered that her patience, empathy, and willingness to listen allowed her team to work together efficiently. By the end of the day, the project was completed successfully, and Sheikh William nodded in approval, praising her not only for the results but for the leadership and compassion she had demonstrated. Emily felt a surge of pride, tempered by humility, as she realized that her abilities were growing far beyond what she had ever imagined. She began to see that life was no longer about simply following rules or performing small tasks, it was about thinking, leading, and making decisions that could affect others positively. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow. Sheikh William introduced Emily to books filled with stories of history, strategy, and human achievement, encouraging her to learn from both success and failure. He also arranged for her to meet scholars, innovators, and thinkers from around the world, giving her perspectives she had never encountered before. Emily soaked up every word, every idea, and every experience, feeling her mind and heart expand with each new lesson. Yet, despite the excitement and the privilege of this new life, Emily remained connected to her humble beginnings. She spent time with her mother, sharing what she had learned and reflecting on the lessons of courage, integrity, and compassion that had guided her thus far. Sarah, proud and quietly amazed, reminded Emily that her true strength came not from wealth or recognition, but from her willingness to try, to learn, and to act with honesty and heart. Emily carried this wisdom with her as she continued to face challenges and opportunities. One day, the Sheikh presented her with a particularly difficult problem, a puzzle that required insight, patience, and careful reasoning. Many adults and educated individuals had failed to solve it, yet Emily approached it calmly, analyzing each piece carefully, considering multiple perspectives, and trusting her intuition. Slowly, steadily, she found the solution, surprising not only herself but also the Sheikh and the other observers who had been watching her. Sheikh William's eyes shone with admiration. "You see, Emily," he said softly, "the greatest achievements are born not of privilege, but of curiosity, courage, and perseverance. You have shown all of these qualities, and more." Emily felt a quiet satisfaction, a mix of pride and gratitude that made her heart swell. She realized that every moment of doubt, every small failure, and every risk she had taken had brought her to this point. Her life, once quiet and constrained, had blossomed into a journey of discovery, learning, and growth that she could never have imagined. Even the guests who had once underestimated her now looked at her with respect, some silently acknowledging her abilities, others seeking to learn from her example. Emily remained humble, focusing on her lessons and the guidance of Sheikh William, knowing that true growth came from constant effort and self-awareness. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's confidence continued to grow. She became more articulate, more decisive, and more aware of the impact her actions could have on others. Sheikh William encouraged her not only to learn but also to think about how she could help others, to consider the value of kindness, empathy, and responsibility. Emily realized that her journey was not just about knowledge or recognition, but about becoming someone who could inspire and support others, someone who could use her abilities to make a positive difference in the world. As the sun set over the palace each evening, casting warm golden hues across the halls and gardens, Emily often found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She remembered the fear she had felt before answering the Sheikh's question, the uncertainty of stepping forward when everyone else froze, and the quiet courage that had guided her. She understood now that courage was not a single act, but a continuous choice to act with honesty, determination, and compassion. Sheikh William often watched her from a distance, noting her growth and the way she approached challenges with a balance of intelligence and heart. He knew that Emily had not only learned from him, but that she had also discovered something essential within herself, the belief that she was capable, worthy, and prepared to face whatever life had in store. And as Emily looked around the grand hall, the sparkling chandeliers, the golden accents, and the other guests who now regarded her with respect, she felt a quiet certainty that her life had changed forever. She had faced fear, embraced opportunity, and discovered her own strength. And in that realization, she found a joy and confidence that would guide her through every challenge, every lesson, and every triumph that lay ahead, knowing that courage, wisdom, and kindness were the true keys to success and fulfillment. Months passed since Emily had first answered Sheikh William's question in Arabic, and in that time, her life had transformed in ways she had never imagined. The palace, once a place of chores and quiet observation, had become a center of learning, discovery, and opportunity, and Emily embraced every moment with a heart full of curiosity and courage. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new experiences, and she faced them all with determination, remembering the advice her mother had given her and the encouragement of the Sheikh. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident, not only in her knowledge of languages and problem solving but also in her understanding of people, responsibility, and herself. Sheikh William continued to guide her, but he also allowed her independence, encouraging her to make decisions and learn from both success and failure. One morning, he presented her with an extraordinary task: to plan and oversee an event at the palace that would bring together scholars, innovators, and young students from around the world. This was unlike any challenge she had faced before, as it required not only intelligence and courage but also diplomacy, organization, and leadership. Emily felt a nervous excitement as she accepted the responsibility. She spent days carefully planning the event, considering every detail, from seating arrangements to schedules, from welcoming speeches to small gestures of hospitality that would make the guests feel respected and valued. She worked closely with the palace staff, learning to delegate tasks, listen to suggestions, and encourage her team with patience and understanding. The project tested her in ways she had not anticipated. She encountered obstacles, from last-minute schedule changes to misunderstandings among team members, and at times, she felt the old pangs of doubt creeping in. But each time, she remembered the courage that had allowed her to answer the Sheikh's question months ago, and she reminded herself that true leadership required persistence, patience, and calm in the face of difficulty. Slowly, she overcame each challenge, learning to stay composed, think creatively, and act decisively. On the day of the event, the palace was alive with energy, voices, and excitement. Guests arrived from distant countries, carrying knowledge, curiosity, and respect, and Emily greeted each one with confidence, offering guidance and hospitality with grace and sincerity. Sheikh William watched quietly from a distance, a faint, proud smile on his face, as Emily navigated the complex event with skill and composure. Everything went smoothly, each part of the plan executed with precision, yet it was Emily's calm demeanor, thoughtful attention, and quiet courage that truly impressed the visitors. They noticed her ability to solve problems quickly, to communicate clearly, and to make everyone feel included and valued. By the end of the day, the event was hailed as a remarkable success, and Emily received compliments not only for her planning but also for her leadership and poise. Sheikh William approached her at the conclusion, his eyes reflecting pride and satisfaction. "Emily," he said, "you have done more than I could have expected. You have demonstrated intelligence, courage, and wisdom, but also something even more important, heart. You have led with kindness, patience, and integrity, and that is the mark of someone destined to achieve great things." Emily felt tears prick her eyes as she absorbed his words. She looked around at the hall, the guests, and the staff, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude, accomplishment, and belonging. Her mind wandered briefly to her mother, Sarah, who had always believed in her, encouraged her, and taught her that courage and knowledge could create opportunity even in the humblest circumstances. Emily realized that everything she had learned, every challenge she had faced, and every risk she had taken had led her to this moment, and she felt a quiet joy that went beyond pride. It was the joy of knowing that her life had purpose and direction. Over the following weeks, Emily's reputation grew, not because she sought recognition, but because people noticed her courage, intelligence, and kindness. Scholars, students, and innovators sought her opinion, valued her insights, and admired her ability to act with thoughtfulness and integrity. Emily embraced these interactions with humility, always remembering that her strength came not only from her talents but also from the lessons her mother had taught her and the guidance Sheikh William had provided. She continued to study, to ask questions, and to challenge herself, always seeking growth, understanding, and opportunities to help others. Life in the palace became a journey of continuous learning, where Emily balanced knowledge, courage, and compassion, demonstrating daily that intelligence was most powerful when paired with heart. One evening, as the golden sun dipped behind the desert horizon, casting long shadows across the palace gardens, Sheikh William invited Emily to walk with him. They strolled quietly, the soft breeze brushing past them, and he spoke in his calm, thoughtful manner. "Emily, you have shown that true potential is not defined by birth or wealth, but by courage, determination, and the willingness to act when others hesitate. You have faced challenges, taken responsibility, and proven that leadership and wisdom come from character, not appearance. You have made me proud, and more importantly, you have proven to yourself that you can achieve anything you set your mind to." Emily felt her heart swell. She realized that her journey had been about far more than answering a question in Arabic or gaining recognition. It had been about discovering her own strength, her ability to act with integrity, and her capacity to inspire and support others. Sheikh William paused, looking out over the golden sands and the shining palace, and then turned his gaze back to her. "Remember, Emily, life will continue to test you. Opportunities will challenge you, obstacles will appear, and moments of doubt will come. But if you hold on to courage, honesty, and kindness, you will always find a way forward. You have already proven that you possess these qualities, and I have no doubt that your future will be extraordinary." Emily nodded, feeling tears of happiness and pride welling in her eyes. She understood that the Sheikh's words were not just encouragement, but a reminder of the responsibilities that came with her growth, the importance of character, and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey she had undertaken, from the timid maid's daughter who had once feared speaking up, to the confident, courageous young woman who now walked beside one of the most influential men in the world. And as the stars began to appear above the palace, shimmering against the night sky, Emily felt a quiet, unshakable certainty. She had the courage to face the unknown, the wisdom to learn from every experience, and the heart to make a difference in the world. She had answered a question once and changed her life, but now she knew that the journey had only just begun. Each challenge ahead would be an opportunity to grow, each lesson a chance to become stronger, and each act of courage a reminder that true greatness comes not from status, wealth, or recognition, but from the courage to act, the integrity to do what is right, and the compassion to lift others as you rise. In that moment, walking through the palace gardens with Sheikh William, Emily felt the culmination of months of learning, trials, and courage, and she smiled quietly to herself, knowing that her journey was no longer defined by fear or doubt but by the strength she had discovered within herself. And so, the maid's daughter who had once been overlooked, underestimated, and invisible had become a young woman of courage, wisdom, and heart, ready to embrace a future filled with opportunity, growth, and the promise that her life could be extraordinary in ways she had only dared to dream. And in that realization, she felt an unshakable joy and determination, knowing that her story was only beginning, and that she had the power to shape it with every choice, every action, and every brave step forward she would take.